The story opens in the luxurious lobby of an upscale hotel. A racist confrontation erupts between a staff member and the black protagonist, who enters quietly but with undeniable authority. The staff's arrogance and dismissive tone shocks everyone watching. A symbolic moment shifts the tension, and the protagonist responds with dignity, ending the chapter with a sharp cliffhanger that hints at her true identity. "We don't serve people like you." The words sliced through the golden air of the hotel lobby like broken glass. Heads turned. Glass chandeliers reflected the tension in sharp, trembling light. The grand mahogany desk gleamed under the glow of crystal lamps, but the poison in the receptionist's voice was enough to stain the marble floor beneath her heels. Guests waiting in line froze. A couple exchanging room keys looked away awkwardly. A bellboy shifted uneasily by the elevator, clutching a brass luggage cart as though it could shield him from the ugliness unfolding in front of him. At the center of it all stood a woman, tall, graceful, her posture a quiet rebellion against the venom hurled at her. She wore a fitted navy blue suit that whispered authority, her hair neatly braided, her eyes calm but steady. She hadn't even raised her voice. She didn't need to. The receptionist, a young man with slicked back hair and the smug arrogance of someone drunk on borrowed power, leaned forward across the counter. His smirk widened as if the insult had empowered him. "You heard me," he said, his tone dripping with entitlement. "This is a 5-star establishment. We don't let just anyone walk in here." A nervous laugh broke out from someone in the back of the line, quickly silenced by the weight of the moment. The air was thick, suffocating, like the pause before. A thunderstorm. The woman, calm, unbothered, lowered her eyes to the keycard in her hand. It was small, plastic, ordinary to anyone else. But the logo embossed on it shimmered under the lobby lights, the same golden crest carved into the marble above the front doors. Her fingers brushed the edge of the card with deliberate slowness, as though touching a weapon forged not of steel but of truth. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "I asked for a room," she said softly, her voice carrying like a subtle drumbeat in the silence. "Not your opinion." The receptionist blinked, thrown off by the quiet sharpness of her reply. His smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He scoffed, leaned back, and rolled his eyes at the uniformed security guard standing nearby. "Escort her out," he ordered. "Now!" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the pianist in the lounge, who had been filling the air with soft jazz, missed a note and fell silent. The security guard, a burly man in a blazer too tight around his shoulders, hesitated. His eyes darted between the receptionist and the woman, as if sensing a storm far greater than his paycheck could cover. "Sir, maybe we should do it," the receptionist snapped, pounding his palm against the desk. "People like her have no business here." The words echoed through the atrium, bouncing off marble and glass. They landed like stones on the ears of the guests, who shifted uncomfortably, caught between disbelief and complicity. The woman's calm didn't waver. Instead, she placed the keycard on the counter, not gently, but with a sharp snap that echoed louder than his insult. A cymbal, small but powerful, vibrating against the polished wood. The sound silenced even the murmur of whispers. For the first time, the receptionist's confidence cracked. His eyes flicked to the crest on the card, recognizing it but refusing to accept its implication. His lips parted, but no words came out. The woman leaned in just slightly, her presence towering over his arrogance without raising her voice. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career," she said, her tone like velvet lined with steel. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended between the chandeliers and the polished floor. A couple near the doors whispered, "Who is she?" A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking questions the mother couldn't answer, but the woman didn't explain. She didn't need to. Her eyes flicked toward the elevator where two men in tailored suits had just stepped out. There. Expression sharp with recognition, the receptionist's smirk collapsed completely. He felt the blood drain from his face, the ground tilt beneath him. The woman turned, her heels clicking like a countdown across the marble. Each step carried authority, each movement more unsettling than the loudest shout. She paused at the edge of the lobby, looked over her shoulder once, and delivered a single line that froze the entire room in place. "You'll find out exactly who I am in 9 minutes." And with that, she walked away, leaving the weight of silence to crush the man who had dared to belittle her. The receptionist swallowed hard, his arrogance curdling into fear. He glanced nervously at the clock above the lounge, its second, hand ticking mercilessly forward. 9 minutes. 9 minutes until everything he thought he controlled would unravel. The lobby buzzed with whispers the moment she disappeared past the velvet drapes that led to the private wing. The chandeliers above, once glowing with warm hospitality, now seemed to spotlight the unease rippling across every guest. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband, clutching his arm. Two businessmen exchanged nervous glances, both too polite to voice the thought stamped across their faces. Who was she? The receptionist straightened his tie with jerky hands, forcing a smile that no longer fit. His voice carried louder than necessary, straining for control. "All right, everyone, carry on." "Nothing to see here," he said, his smirk wobbling like a mask that no longer adhered to his face, but people weren't carrying on. They lingered, stealing glances at the keycard still sitting on the desk like a piece of evidence. Its gold crest gleamed beneath the chandelier, mocking him. The receptionist wanted to swipe it into the trash, but his hand twitched and froze inches above it, as if touching it would burn. The security guard remained rooted to the spot, arms crossed, jaw tight. He had been ordered to throw her out, but he hadn't moved. His conscience weighed heavier than the salary that fed his family. His gaze locked on the receptionist, and for the first time, his voice carried steel. "You sure you want to push this further?" The receptionist snapped his fingers impatiently. "She's nobody, a troublemaker. That's what people like her do, they cause scenes." The bellboy by the elevator muttered under his breath, "Too quiet for anyone but himself. That didn't look like nobody to me." From the piano lounge, the musician picked up his melody again, though his fingers trembled on the keys. The tune sounded off, discordant, like the hotel itself had lost its rhythm. Guests sipped champagne without tasting it, eyes trained on the corridor where the woman had vanished. The receptionist leaned against the counter, trying to restore his earlier confidence. But inside, doubt slithered in like smoke. Her words replayed in his mind. 9 minutes. Why 9? Why not now? Why give a number that ticked like a bomb? He tapped his pen nervously against the guestbook, trying to drown the thought, but each tick of the clock above the lounge stabbed sharper into his chest. The second hand dragged mercilessly forward. 8 minutes left. He glanced toward the entrance doors, half expecting police to walk in. No, not police. Something worse? Lawyers? Reporters? Investors? His imagination ran wild. But each possibility was tethered to the same uncheckable truth. He had underestimated her. A guest stepped forward, curiosity outweighing fear. A middle-aged man in a gray suit, American accent thick on his words, addressed the receptionist directly. "Excuse me, who exactly was that woman?" The receptionist forced a laugh, the sound hollow. "Just another guest who thought she was special. We don't tolerate entitlement here." The man's brows furrowed. "Entitlement?" She didn't seem entitled. She seemed calm. His eyes shifted to the gold crest on the card. "And I?" "Recognize that logo. It's the same as the hotel's branding." The receptionist's throat tightened. "Coincidence," he muttered, too quickly, but the crowd wasn't convinced. Another guest chimed in, a woman clutching a designer handbag. She looked like she belonged here more than you do. Her voice cut sharp and heads nodded around her. The receptionist's face flushed crimson. His grip on the desk hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. None of you do. I'm the one who works here. I know the rules. The security guard's eyes narrowed. Rules don't excuse disrespect. That single sentence hung in the air heavier than his earlier insult. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The receptionist's power, so loud a moment ago, now felt fragile, cracking under the weight of collective disapproval. He tried to smile again, but his lips betrayed him. His eyes darted once more to the crest on the card, glowing under the chandelier. His hand itched to grab it, but something deeper, fear, shame, dread, kept him frozen. 7 minutes left. The receptionist turned toward the clock, then toward the corridor, and finally back to the watching crowd. His chest tightened, his breaths shallow. He wanted to believe she had walked away, that she wouldn't come back, that she was bluffing, but the sound of heels clicking faintly in the distance shattered that illusion. Click, click, click. The crowd stiffened, eyes widening. The receptionist's throat went dry. He leaned forward, his hand sweaty on the polished desk. She was returning, and with every step that echoed closer, the weight of her words crushed harder on his chest. 9 minutes was almost over. Silence. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that strangles. The hotel lobby, once a symphony of polite chatter, rolling luggage, and clinking champagne glasses, now carried only the hollow echo of approaching footsteps. The sound was faint, distant, but each click of her heels reverberated like a countdown in the chest of everyone listening. The receptionist adjusted his tie again, though it no longer sat straight. Sweat dotted his temples, gleaming under the chandelier's light. He forced a shallow laugh, looking around at the guests. She's trying to make a scene. That's all this is, just theatrics. But his words didn't carry. They fell limp against the thick wall of silence. Nobody laughed. Nobody nodded. Eyes refused to meet his, sliding instead toward the velvet drapes where the sound of heels drew closer. The bellboy's hand shook as he gripped the brass luggage cart. His young face carried something between awe and fear. I don't think. This is a scene, he whispered, though loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I think this is her stage. The pianist stopped playing again. His fingers rested on the keys, frozen in midair. The melody had abandoned him. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The receptionist's smile cracked. His jaw tensed. She's nobody, he insisted, his voice rising like a child insisting the dark held no monsters. Just another guest pretending to be more than she is. The security guard stepped closer, lowering his voice but making sure it carried. To the watching crowd, pretending? His tone was edged with disbelief. If that was pretending, then why do you look like you've already lost? The question pierced deeper than the words themselves. Heads nodded subtly around the lobby. Whispers of agreement buzzed like bees, low and dangerous. The receptionist slammed his palm against the counter, the sharp crack jolting some guests. Enough. This is my hotel. I decide who belongs here. But the moment the words left his mouth, regret shadowed his face. My hotel. The slip revealed insecurity. Guests caught it instantly. A woman in pearls arched her brow, whispering, if it's his hotel, why is he afraid of her? The words spread like wildfire, murmured, repeated, distorted. The receptionist clenched his fists, breathing faster. 5 minutes left. The ticking of the clock stabbed into the silence, merciless and mocking. The receptionist's eyes darted toward it, then back to the crowd, then finally to the velvet drapes. Her heels clicked louder now. She hadn't rushed, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't once broken her calm stride. The rhythm of her walk was steady, deliberate, commanding. She didn't need to run. Time itself bent toward her. The bellboy suddenly set the luggage cart aside, straightening his back. His voice, timid but brave, cut through the silence. "She belongs here more than any of us." The words sent a shiver across the lobby. Guests looked at him, startled by his courage. The receptionist's face twisted in fury. "You're just a bellboy. Don't speak out of turn." But the damage was done. The boy's statement rang louder than the receptionist's outburst. For the first time, the tide had shifted. Voices that had been hushed began to murmur openly. She looked important. She carried herself like she owned the place. She said 9 minutes. The receptionist's chest heaved. His eyes darted wildly, searching for support. But the crowd was no longer with him. Their silence wasn't agreement anymore. It was anticipation. 4 minutes left. The chandeliers seemed to sway under the weight of the moment. The pianist's hands trembled, pressing down a single note by mistake, a lonely sound that carried. Eerily across the marble floor. The receptionist leaned toward the security guard, his voice frantic now. "You have to stop her before she gets back here. If she comes..." The guard shook his head firmly. "If she comes, it's not my place to stop her. It's yours." His eyes narrowed. "And you already failed." The receptionist staggered, back as if struck. His mouth opened, closed, no words forming. 3 minutes left. The crowd shifted, their eyes snapping toward the drapes. The sound of heels was closer now, louder, more precise. Each step rang like a verdict. The receptionist grabbed the key card from the counter at last, clutching it like evidence he could twist into his defense. His hand shook as he held it up. This is fake. That's all. She must have stolen it." But the lie was brittle, breaking apart before it even left his tongue. A man in a gray suit stepped forward, voice stern. "That card isn't fake. I've seen that crest in corporate documents before." "That woman," his voice faltered, eyes narrowing. "She's not who you think she is." 2 minutes left. The receptionist's legs felt weak. His grip on the card loosened. Whispers swelled into a chorus, a storm brewing in every corner of the lobby. 1 minute left. The velvet drapes stirred. The air thickened. Every breath in the room sensed with the pounding clock. And then, as if time itself bowed to her presence, she stepped back into the lobby. The velvet drapes parted like curtains on a stage, and there she was. Her heels struck the marble with quiet precision, each step echoing louder than the receptionist's racing heartbeat. She didn't rush, didn't falter. Her navy suit caught the chandelier's glow, the sharp lines of her presence commanding attention with a gravity that silenced even the whispers. The receptionist gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles pale, sweat dripping from his brow. The gold crest keycard shook in his hand like a fragile secret he couldn't hold on to. He had wanted her gone, erased from his sight. Instead, she had returned, stronger, untouchable. The crowd parted instinctively, forming a silent aisle as she approached. Guests who had once stood indifferent now shifted aside as though recognizing royalty. The pianist's hands hovered above the keys, frozen. The bellboy straightened, eyes wide, heart pounding in silent allegiance. The receptionist forced his voice into the void, brittle but loud. "Ma'am," he started, the word cracking like glass. You have no right to be here." Her gaze slid to him, calm but heavy. It was the kind of look that stripped away pretense, cutting deeper than any insult. She stopped just short of the counter, her presence swallowing the space between them. "No right?" She repeated softly, her voice measured, velvet and steel combined. You think ownership is defined by arrogance? A murmur stirred through the crowd. The receptionist stammered, raising the key card as though it were a shield. This card means nothing. You probably stole it. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into something sharper, an acknowledgement of his fear. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her hand across the counter. The receptionist hesitated, but the weight of eyes pressing into him forced him to drop the card into her palm. She held it up for everyone to see. The gold crest shimmered, catching the chandelier's glow. Her voice carried, not shouted, but filling every corner of the atrium. This, she said, isn't just a card. It's a promise, a standard, a legacy. And you dared to treat it as if it were meaningless. The receptionist's throat bobbed. He wanted to speak, but no words came. 9 minutes had passed. The clock above the lounge chimed softly, marking the moment like a gavel in a courtroom. Gasps rippled as the symbolism settled over the crowd. The woman turned slightly, addressing not him, but the guests. How do you measure dignity? In uniforms? In skin color? Or in the way you treat strangers when you believe no one is watching? Silence answered her. The kind of silence that revealed guilt. The receptionist's mask shattered. His voice rose, desperate, cracking. You can't just walk in here and— I already have, she interrupted, her tone sharper now, cutting him off mid-sentence. Her words landed like stone, echoing in the vast lobby. The guests leaned in, breathless, caught in the rhythm of a scene they knew would be remembered. The security guard stepped forward, clearing his throat. His voice was steady, firm. Ma'am, should I remove him? The receptionist spun, eyes wide. Remove me? But the guard didn't flinch. His gaze was fixed on her, awaiting her command. Her silence was deliberate, her pause heavy. She didn't need to shout. Authority radiated from her stillness. The receptionist's composure collapsed entirely. He slammed his hand against the counter, spit flying with his words. I don't care who you think you are. You're nothing here. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned forward just enough for her words to strike like a whisper with the force of thunder. Nothing? She repeated. This hotel is my blood. My name is carved into its foundation. And you are a stain on it. Gasps exploded around the room. The receptionist's face drained of color. His lips trembled, his knees weak. You're lying, he whispered hoarsely, clinging to denial like a lifeline. But denial drowned quickly. From the drapes, 2 suited. Executives stepped forward, the same men who had seen her earlier. Their eyes locked on her, respect written across their faces. One bowed his head slightly before speaking. Madam President, he said, his voice clear, resonant, carrying through the lobby. Your car is ready. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Guests clutched pearls, gasped aloud, eyes wide with realization. Madam President, CEO. The truth was no longer hidden. The receptionist staggered back, his hand gripping the counter for balance. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. She didn't spare him another glance. She turned instead toward the crowd, her voice calm but heavy with finality. In 9 minutes, arrogance reveals itself, but so does truth. And with that, she began walking again, her heels striking against marble. Every step a verdict, every movement unraveling the illusion of control the receptionist thought he held. The clock ticked on, merciless. His career, his dignity, was already unraveling second by second. The lobby felt like a courtroom now, and every guest was both jury and witness. The receptionist's once cocky smirk had evaporated, replaced by a sheen of panic on his forehead. His lips twitched as he looked around, desperate for anyone to defend him. But the faces staring back held only one thing: judgment. Her heels still echoed faintly in the background as she walked toward the grand staircase, leaving him in a silence that weighed like chains. "Wait!" His voice cracked, bouncing through the marble atrium. This is a mistake. She's not who she says she is." Heads turned back toward him. The guests leaned closer. His words, meant to regain control, only revealed his unraveling. One of the executives stepped forward, his tone crisp. "Enough," but the receptionist shook his head violently. His hands trembled as he pointed toward her retreating figure. "She's lying. You people don't know her. She forged that card, yes. That's what happened." The crowd murmured, confusion mixed with disbelief. The guard crossed his arms, his stance firm, his eyes betraying no sympathy. The woman stopped at the base of the staircase. Slowly, she turned, her presence commanding the space with the gravity of a judge delivering a verdict. "If I am lying," she said evenly, "then open your records. Call the board. Ask the staff who built this place, stone by stone. My name will be there. Yours will not." The words cut like steel. Her calmness was lethal, far more dangerous than shouting. The receptionist's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. His mind scrambled for a lifeline. He grabbed the counter, pulling himself upright. No, you don't understand. She cheated all of you." The piano player, who had been frozen in silence since her return, finally spoke. His voice was soft but carried through the room. "She didn't trick us. You did." All eyes snapped to him. His hands, still hovering above the keys, were steady now. "I watched how you treated her," he continued. "I saw the way you smirked, the way you belittled. You never thought anyone noticed, but we did." The murmurs swelled into agreement. Guests nodded, voices rising. "He's right. I saw it too. She was calm. He was cruel." The receptionist's face drained of color. He raised his hands, palms outward, as if to push back the crowd's judgment. No, you've got it wrong. I was just doing my job." The security guard's deep voice boomed. "Your job is to serve with dignity, not to disgrace this establishment." The receptionist turned frantically, pointing toward the receptionist turned frantically, pointing toward the "Guard, you can't talk to me like that. You're nothing but." But he stopped himself. The word that nearly left his lips would have condemned him beyond repair. The guard's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. The room knew. They all knew what insult had almost escaped, and that silence was louder than any confession. The woman's gaze locked onto him again. Her voice was quiet, but her words carried weight. In arrogance, truth always slips. In your silence, we hear it louder than ever. The receptionist's knees buckled slightly. His confidence had collapsed entirely, leaving only the fragile shell of a man who had thought himself untouchable. Then came the final blow. The second executive stepped forward, a folder in hand. He opened it deliberately, the sound of paper crackling filling the silence. "These," he said, "are the employee evaluations. Yours, to be specific." The receptionist froze. The executive read aloud, his tone sharp and cold. Complaint after complaint. Guests felt belittled, disrespected. Staff reported arrogance, favoritism, abuse. And still you thought you were safe, because you believed no one would ever look close enough. The folder snapped shut with finality. Gasps rippled. The receptionist's mouth hung open. His denial cracked, shattering under the weight of documented truth. "You," he stammered, pointing weakly at the woman. You set this up. You wanted me gone." She tilted her head, her calm gaze piercing him. "You destroyed yourself. All I did was walk through the door." The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not in laughter, but in something heavier, collective acknowledgement. The truth was laid bare. The receptionist's legs gave way, and he sank behind the counter, his head in his hands. The arrogance that once fueled him now suffocated him. The clock chimed again, its echo reverberating like the toll of a bell. 10 minutes had passed since the challenge had been spoken. In those 10 minutes, a man's career had collapsed, and she hadn't even raised her voice. The heavy silence in the lobby lingered like smoke after a fire. Guests stood in clusters, whispering, in urgent tones. The receptionist remained slumped behind the counter, a broken figure against the polished marble, his pride shattered into pieces no one wanted to collect. But the woman hadn't moved. She stood still, one hand gently resting on the railing of the staircase, her presence commanding without effort. It was as though she was waiting for the truth, for the final curtain to lift. The first executive cleared his throat, breaking the silence. His voice carried authority, but there was also something new in it, respect. "Ma'am, if you don't mind, would you allow us to verify your claim? We want to do this properly, before all." The woman gave the slightest nod. "Of course." A man in a gray suit, part of the management team, hurried to the front desk. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the digital archives. The receptionist raised his head suddenly, eyes wild. "No, don't do that. She's not. She doesn't belong here." But the guard placed a firm hand on his shoulder, shoving him gently but unmistakably back down. "Stay seated." The guests leaned in, anticipation thick in the air. The tapping of keys echoed like a drumbeat, and then the man froze. His eyes widened at the glowing screen. "Found it," he whispered. The words rippled across the room. The executive leaned over the monitor. His face hardened, then shifted to astonishment. He straightened, holding a printed sheet in his hand like a judge holding the final verdict. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "there is no doubt. She is exactly who she claims to be." The lobby gasped as one. The receptionist let out a strangled sound, part denial, part despair. His eyes darted left and right as if searching for a hole to crawl into. The executive continued, reading aloud, "Her name is on the founding board. She financed the first wing of this hotel. Her contributions built the very walls we stand in. Without her, none of this would exist." The woman's face remained composed, her calm radiating more power than triumph ever could. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She only let the truth settle into the hearts of everyone present. One guest, a woman in a blue dress, whispered to her friend, "All this time, we thought she was just another guest." Her friend shook her head in awe. "No, she's the reason any of us can even be here." The piano player rose from his seat. Without words, he played a single chord low, resonant, and solemn, as though underscoring the revelation. The note hung in the air, amplifying the moment. The receptionist shook his head violently, his voice cracking. "No, this can't be. You're lying. You tricked them all." The guard's grip tightened on his shoulder. "Enough. The truth has spoken." But the woman, still calm, finally spoke again. "I don't need to prove myself to you. The records prove enough. But I will say this. Every stone in this building carries the memory of the sacrifices made. Respect was supposed to be the foundation. You chose arrogance instead." Her words struck deeper than any punishment. The guests fell silent, some lowering their heads, others staring at her with reverence. The executive took another step forward. "On behalf of the board and in front of every witness here, we extend our deepest apologies for what you've endured." He turned his gaze toward the receptionist, whose face was drenched in sweat. "And as for you, you're finished." The guard yanked him up from his chair. He stumbled, his once polished shoes squeaking against the floor. The crowd parted like water, watching as his disgrace was dragged into the open. "No, please. You can't do this to me," he begged, his voice echoing. "I gave years to this place. I worked harder than anyone else. You can't just throw me away." The woman's eyes softened for the briefest moment, not with pity, but with truth. "You were never thrown away. You chose this end the day you decided to look down on others." The words sealed his fate. The guard marched him toward the side entrance, his pleas growing weaker, more desperate, until the door slammed shut behind him. The lobby breathed again. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the guests began to clap. Not loudly, not chaotically, but in a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. Applause filled the air, reverent and unforced. The executives bowed their heads toward her. The guard released his stern posture almost in respect. Even the pianist struck a chord of resolution, warm and uplifting dot, and through it all, she remained still. Not triumphant, not boastful. Simply present. She lifted her chin slightly, her voice carrying through the chamber one last time. Truth needs no crown. It only needs light. And today, light has done its work. The applause swelled, filling the grand hall like a tide. The unveiling was complete. The echo of applause still lingered as the woman turned away from the crowd. Her composure hadn't cracked once, but deep inside her chest a storm brewed, a storm no one else could see. Years she had been invisible. For years her sacrifices had been forgotten. And now, in this sudden blaze of recognition, she felt the weight of all those silenced years pressing on her shoulders. The lobby had transformed. Where once there was arrogance and dismissal, now there was reverence. Guests who had gossiped and whispered earlier were now lining up to offer their apologies. "Ma'am." "I'm sorry," murmured a man in a tailored navy suit. "I judged you before I even knew your name." Another woman in pearls stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You taught us something today. Forgive us." The woman simply nodded. She didn't seek their forgiveness, only their awareness. Meanwhile, the executives huddled together near the counter. Their voices were low, but urgency hummed through their words. They spoke of damage control, of reputation, of how this moment would ripple far beyond the walls of the hotel. "We need to issue a public statement," one whispered. "This could make or break us," another replied. And yet, even as they schemed, their eyes flickered toward the woman with awe. For the first time, they saw her not as an ordinary guest, but as the architect of their entire foundation. The receptionist, however, had not vanished completely. Through the glass doors at the side entrance, his figure could be seen pacing back and forth in the alley. He raged silently, his fists clenching, his lips curling around curses no one could hear. Though banished, he refused to accept defeat. Back inside, the pianist shifted the melody to something softer, almost mournful. The notes curled upward like smoke, wrapping around the guests who remained. It was as though the music itself was asking, "What will you do with what you've just witnessed?" One child, no older than 10, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy," he whispered, "why were they so mean to her if she made the hotel?" The father knelt, shame heavy in his eyes. "Because sometimes, son, people forget where true worth comes from. They judge by faces, not by hearts." The boy looked toward the woman. "She looks like a queen," the father nodded. "She is more than that. She is truth," the woman overheard. Her eyes softened not with pride, but with hope. Perhaps the next generation would learn faster than the last. The executives finally approached, their leader stepping forward once again. He bowed deeply, a gesture that stunned every guest present. "Madam," he said, "we will make this right, not only with words, but with action. This hotel owes you more than gratitude, it owes you justice." She tilted her head slightly. Justice is not owed to me. It is owed to every soul who is ever dismissed, overlooked, or cast aside for who they are. If my story has meaning, let it be a mirror. Do not just repair your walls, repair your hearts. The crowd stirred at her words. Some bowed their heads. Some nodded in silent agreement, but the executives exchanged uneasy glances. To them, her words sounded less like advice and more like a challenge, one that might unravel everything they thought they controlled. Still, they dared not speak against her. Outside, the receptionist suddenly slammed his fist against the glass, drawing startled gasps from those near the doors. His face twisted with rage. "She's nothing. Do you hear me?" He shouted through the glass. "You'll regret believing her." Security moved quickly, pulling him further away. But his voice carried even as he was dragged down the alley, his screams fading into the distance. The guests shivered. Some whispered prayers. Others simply shook their heads. The woman, however, remained unshaken. She closed her eyes briefly, as if sending silent strength not to herself, but to everyone who had witnessed his collapse. The pianist struck a final soft chord, the music dissolving into silence once more. Then, for the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. Not for victory, not for revenge, only for the fact that truth had finally broken through. The ripple had begun. The night deepened outside, stars glittering faintly beyond the glass walls of the hotel. Inside, the air still buzzed with the weight of revelation. But beneath the polished chandeliers and golden accents, a darker undercurrent began to stir. The executives had promised change. They had bowed, apologized, even vowed to issue a public statement. Yet, in their private thoughts, doubt festered. Some saw opportunity, new publicity, a chance to rebuild their brand as champions of equality. Others saw danger. What if the truth of their neglect spread too far? What if the world judged them as harshly as they had judged her? In the center of the lobby, the woman sat in quiet strength, her back straight, her eyes steady. She had no need for theatrics. Her very presence was the story now. Guests approached cautiously, like pilgrims before a shrine. Some left flowers from the lobby's arrangements at her table. Others simply whispered, "Thank you." But outside, in the shadows, the banished receptionist still seethed. He had been dragged away by security, yet somehow he returned, lurking just beyond the light. His pride, his prejudice, his venom, it had not been erased. If anything, it had grown sharper, like a blade denied its strike. His phone buzzed in his hand. A contact unknown to most, but dangerous to all. He answered in a harsh whisper. "They've humiliated me. They've made her a saint. I won't allow it." The voice on the other end was calm, chilling. "Then break the mask and reveal what lies beneath." The receptionist smirked. He knew exactly what that meant. Back inside, one of the executives approached the woman again. His tone was softer now, almost pleading. "We wish to honor you formally. A press conference tomorrow morning. Cameras, journalists, your story deserves the world's ear." The woman studied him, her gaze penetrating. "And do you seek to honor me or yourselves?" The question sliced through the air. The executive faltered. Around them, guests exchanged looks. She had exposed the truth yet again. Their motives were not pure. "I do not seek cameras," she continued. "I do not need headlines. What I need is change, lived and breathed, not performed." Her words were simple, but they landed like thunder. Yet as she spoke, the chandelier above flickered. A sudden shudder in the electricity caused the lights to dim, then flare. Guests glanced upward nervously. The pianist paused mid-note, and in that strange, tense silence, a voice rang out from the far corner of the lobby. "She's lying." All heads turned. The receptionist had forced his way back inside, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild with rage. Security scrambled, but he raised his hands, shouting louder, "She's no hero. She abandoned this place long ago. She left it to rot. And now she returns for glory." Gasps echoed. The crowd rippled with uncertainty that the woman did not move. She did not flinch. "Do you have proof of your words?" she asked, her voice calm as ever. The receptionist sneered. "Proof? Everyone knows it." She turned her back when it mattered most. For a moment, the crowd wavered. Doubt was a contagious thing. Some whispered nervously. Others frowned, uncertain that the woman rose slowly from her seat. Her posture radiated dignity, a queen unshaken by a jester's lies. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice resonating through the hall. "There will always be those who fear truth. They will invent shadows to hide it, but shadows cannot stand when the light has already entered." Her eyes locked with his. "You seek to break me with lies, but all you've broken tonight is your own mask." The guest turned toward the receptionist, now not with curiosity, but with contempt. His attempt to smear her had exposed his bitterness more than her weakness. His hands trembled as he realized his grip on the room was gone. Security seized him at last, dragging him toward the exit. His screams echoed, but no one listened any more. The crowd had already chosen who to believe. The woman exhaled softly, as if releasing years of weight from her chest. She returned to her seat, her calm composure unshaken. The pianist began again, this time with a triumphant note that soared high into the vaulted ceiling. The guests followed, applause rising once more, not for drama, not for spectacle, but for truth that refused to bend. And yet, as the clapping filled the air, the executives exchanged nervous glances. For the truth had indeed entered their walls, and they knew what it demanded could not be ignored forever. The hotel's grand hall was quieter now, yet the silence carried weight. Every guest who had witnessed the confrontation could feel it. The air itself had shifted. The woman had stood unshaken, while the receptionist's bitterness had consumed him before their eyes. Truth had triumphed, but truth was never a final act. It was always the beginning of something larger. Outside the glass doors, the city glowed in midnight neon. News of the incident had already begun spreading across social media. Videos recorded by guests were being shared, reposted, dissected. Within hours, hashtags carrying her name rose to the top of trending lists. What began as whispers in a lobby was quickly becoming a storm across the nation. Inside, the executives huddled in a corner, their suits stiff but their voices frantic. "This is out of our control. We can't let the narrative spiral. If we don't respond immediately, we're finished." One of them, the same man who had promised her a press conference, clenched his jaw. "We can't fight this. We have to stand with her publicly, openly. If we resist, we'll only look weaker." But another shook his head. "You don't understand. Aligning with her means admitting we were wrong. That means lawsuits, headlines, financial losses." Tense silence followed. For these men, justice was measured not in morality but in numbers, risk, and profit. At the center of the room, the woman still sat with quiet dignity. She heard their whispers, she always did, but she no longer needed to fight them with words. The tide was already turning beyond these walls. A young guest, perhaps no older than 18, approached her nervously. He clutched his phone, the screen glowing with a recording. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I filmed what happened earlier. People online, they're saying you gave me hope." "That you gave them hope to?" Her eyes softened. She reached out, gently closing his trembling hands around the phone. "Hope isn't mine to give," she told him. "It was always inside you. Tonight, you simply remembered it." Tears welled in the boy's eyes. For the first time, he stood taller, his shoulders no longer weighed down. Moments later, a woman in a modest dress approached. Her accent carried the rhythm of another land. "Sister," she whispered, "you spoke for me tonight. For years, I cleaned these floors. I thought my voice didn't matter. But when you spoke, I felt seen." Others followed. A businessman, in a tailored suit, ashamed of his own silence. A single mother who had endured prejudice in silence. A young white couple who admitted they had never realized the cruelty hidden in everyday dismissals until they saw it stripped bare. The woman listened to each story patiently, her eyes never leaving theirs. She did not raise her voice, but every word she spoke returned to them like light reflected through a prism clear. Gentle, undeniable. But not everyone was moved. One of the older executives stepped forward, his frustration breaking through his polished mask. "Enough of this performance," he snapped. "You think you can shame us into submission? We run this establishment, not you. This hotel has stood for decades. Your little speech won't change its foundation." The lobby froze. All eyes shifted back to the woman. She rose once more, every step echoing on the marble floor. When she spoke, her words were low but resonant, filling every corner of the hall. "Foundations are not made of stone," she said. "They are made of people. And when the people rise, the walls built on their silence will crumble." The executive's face flushed, his authority unraveling before the weight of her truth. From the back of the crowd, applause began soft, hesitant, then louder, then unstoppable. A wave of sound filled the lobby, drowning out the old man's indignation. Guests, workers, even some junior staff joined in. The sound was not for her alone. It was for themselves, for the awakening that had taken root inside them. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. They could feel it too. The tide had shifted beyond their control. And then the unthinkable happened. Reporters began to arrive. Somehow, word had spread faster than they anticipated. Cameras, microphones, flashes of light filled the lobby. Questions flew in every direction. Who is she? What really happened tonight? Is the hotel responsible for discrimination? The executives tried to step forward, but the crowd pushed them aside. All attention was on her now. She did not flinch at the cameras. She did not tremble at the lights. She simply stood, her presence steady, her voice calm. "The truth," she said into the sea of microphones, "does not belong to me alone. It belongs to everyone who has been silenced, dismissed, or erased. Tonight was never about me. Tonight was about us. And we are no longer invisible." The hall erupted once more, but this time the sound was louder, deeper. It was no longer a hotel lobby. It was a battlefield where silence had lost and truth had claimed its ground. Outside, the streets were already filling with people. The tide had indeed turned, and nothing, not power, not wealth, not tradition, could stop it now. The hotel lobby was no longer a place of luxury and silence. It had become a stage, alive with cameras, microphones, and hundreds of eyes that refused to look away. What had begun as a single act of humiliation had grown into a storm that could no longer be contained. The woman stood tall in the center, her calm presence commanding the entire room. She was not a celebrity, not a politician, not someone the world had once known, but tonight she had become a voice carried by millions. The reporters pressed closer. Their questions overlapped, but one cut through the chaos. "Ma'am, do you believe this hotel, this institution represents the wider sickness of discrimination in our society?" The woman's gaze swept across the crowd. She saw fear on some faces, guilt on others, but also fire newly awakened courage. She did not answer with anger, nor with hesitation. "This building is only a reflection," she said, "a mirror showing us what we choose to ignore. But a mirror does not shape who we are, it only shows us what we've become. The choice of who we become tomorrow, that is still ours. The words hung in the air like a bell's final toll. For a long moment, silence. Then applause louder than before, longer, unbroken. People rose to their feet. The very walls of the lobby seemed to tremble with the force of it. But in the corner, the hotel's general manager, the man who had orchestrated her humiliation, remained stone-faced. He had not spoken since the incident, his jaw clenched, his pride refusing to bend. Now, under the blaze of cameras, he stepped forward. "This is absurd," he barked. "You've turned a misunderstanding into a circus. This establishment does not bow to spectacle." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few staff members shrank back, but most stood rooted, unwilling to look away. The woman's eyes met his. For the first time, there was no anger in them, only pity. "You fear losing power," she said gently, "because you never learned what true power is. You built your throne on silence, on shadows, on the obedience of others. But tonight, the lights came on, and shadows cannot survive the light." Her words cut deeper than any accusation. The man staggered slightly, as though the ground beneath him had shifted. Before he could recover, one of the hotel employees, a young black bellhop, stepped forward. His voice trembled, but it carried. "She's right. For years I kept my head down, afraid to speak, afraid of men like you. But not anymore. I quit. And I won't be the only one." Another voice rose, then another. One by one, staff members began speaking, confessing the racism, the cruelty, the dismissals they had endured. Each story landed like a stone in the silence, and together they built a mountain that no executive could climb. That the reporters' cameras flashed wildly. The world was watching, recording every moment. The general manager's face twisted in panic. For years, he had ruled unchecked. But now, his empire was crumbling in real time. He tried to shout, to regain control, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of truth. The woman raised her hand. The crowd quieted instantly, as if the air itself had leaned toward her. "Tonight," she said, "is not about destroying one man or one hotel. Tonight is about remembering who we are. We are more than the hatred that divides us, more than the silence that diminishes us. We are human, and we are stronger together than apart." She looked directly into the nearest camera, her voice firm but tender. "To anyone watching this, do not wait for someone else to speak. Be the voice you needed when you were silent. Be the light where others see only shadow, because the tide has turned. And this time it will not turn back." The lobby erupted. Once more, this time not just in applause, but in something deeper, unity. People embraced, strangers clasped hands, and even the young boy who had filmed her earlier stood with his chest out, his face shining with pride. As for the general manager, he was escorted out, his authority stripped, his empire gone. But his downfall was not the victory. The victory was the people who had found their voices, the crowd that had discovered its strength, and the millions watching who realized that silence was no longer an option. Outside the hotel, the streets were filled with people holding candles, their lights stretching for blocks. What had begun as one woman's stand had become a movement. She stepped outside, and the crowd parted for her. Phones lifted high, voices chanting not her name, but a single word that carried across the night: justice. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. Not for herself, but for what had been born tonight. The world had changed, even if only by one step. And one step, when taken together, could move mountains. The cameras caught her walking into the night, her figure framed by the glow of candles, her silhouette strong, unbroken. And though the night was quiet, her words still echoed in every heart that had heard them. Shadows cannot survive the light.